Hello, class, and welcome to Forensic Psychology, Behavioral Science 455. This is the online version, -5 at Sisseton Wahpeton College. My name is Dr. NSoggie, and you can find all of the information for this course on the e-learning Sisseton Wahpeton site. A little bit about this course. If you want to just open up your course syllabus that you can find at the top of the course site, you can open that up and kind of follow along a little bit, and or you can just, of course, follow along with this video. This course is in the fall of 2025. It is what we call a weekly asynchronous course. What that means is that there is no set class time. So there will not be any Zoom meetings at any specific time for this course. But because it is weekly, that means that there are things that you are expected to do each week. So it's encouraged and indeed required that you complete weekly assignments. Keep up with your readings, do the videos, show up for class. One of the basic things is that I take attendance. And the way that I take attendance for this course is I simply log in and see that you have logged into this course each week. And that counts as your attendance. Now, there is no marks for attendance, but it does count towards other things. Like for example, if you are on a scholarship or something, the school will be reporting your attendance there. So those kinds of things are important for you. In addition, the e-learning site is set up so that if you don't sign in over a 14-day period, it will actually shut down. And then you'll have to go in and talk to IT about getting it reset up. So it's a bit of a pain. So basically, what I'm saying is sign in every week. Do your work, do your readings, and it makes life much less stressful. Now, what is this course about? This course is about the field of forensic psychology. It's a very broad field, and so we'll be touching on many different areas in it, from criminal justice to evaluating individuals, doing profiling, what's used in investigation techniques, what motivates people to cause crime and to do criminal activity, what kind of considerations are there ethically and legally for dealing with people, and basically just understanding the criminal mind and what motivates antisocial people and criminal behavior. As far as textbooks, all the readings are on the course site, and so there is no required textbook. We'll be taking journal articles and that sort of thing, very up-to-date materials in the course site, but it means that you don't need to purchase any books, so hopefully it saves you a little bit of money. As always, some things that we want to do within this course are integrate Dakota cultural values into your personal and professional activities. We want you to demonstrate that you have excellent written and verbal skills, so be mindful to write professionally. We encourage you to use technology to research and to communicate, and to just apply some good, solid, critical thinking skills to real-world problems. When it comes to the writing expectations, I expect you to write, if you're submitting something, to write in APA formatting, American Psychological Association. If you are doing a research paper for this course, I would like you to do it in APA 7th edition professional formatting, not student formatting. Yes, true, you are students, but we are training you to be professional. So I would like you to, whenever possible, to use professional formatting. Now, let's take a look a little bit at the grading for this course. There are, because this is a senior level course, I'm not too worried about all the little extra assignments that I normally have for freshmen and sophomore students. For you, because this is a senior level class, I'm going to keep it nice and simple. We have 4 things for you to do besides showing up and educating yourself through the lecture times and through the readings. There will be 4 assessments. 3 of them are quizzes. The quizzes are online, individual, without any extra help, 10-minute timed quizzes. Nice and easy and straightforward. I will provide study guides for you to prepare for your quizzes, but remember, they are timed and they are limited to 10 minutes. And the reason why I do that is so that you're not tempted to try to be Googling the answers or looking things up or anything else. You come in, you do the multiple choice questions, and you leave. Nice and simple. If you're prepared, it will be a nice, easy experience. It will only require extra time if you are tempted to use extra materials and start looking for answers. And that's not the intention here. So don't be doing that. Just as far as when you can expect each of these quizzes to be, there's one at the end of September, one at the end of October, and one at the end of November. And on top of that, you have a individual assignment that's worth 40%. Note, 40% of your final mark. So it's very important that you do this one. This one is due at the end of November, November 28th. And you have the choice of either doing a creative project, say for example, creating a YouTube video, or you can do a creative infographic poster and take a picture of it and upload that, or you can write a traditional research paper. If you're going to write a traditional research paper, I do want it to be at least 10 pages, and I want you to format in APA 7th edition professional formatting. Once you understand that every page in APA 7th edition formatting counts as a page, you realize that 10 pages is not very much. And I want you to submit that in either a Word document or better yet in a PDF file and upload that to the assignment box on the e-learning. Whatever you're doing, upload it to the e-learning assignment box. If you are doing a video and you want other people to be involved, then my expectations for that are, say you're working with a partner, it's 15 minutes of video per person. So if you have 2 people involved, that makes it a 30-minute video. If it's 3 people involved, then it's a 45-minute video. And again, in a case like that, the video itself will be too large to upload to the assignment box. So what you would need to do at that point would be to upload it, say, for example, to YouTube. If you don't want other people to see it, you can make it unlisted and then just submit the link in the assignment box. As far as the grading scale, an F is anything below a 59 or below. A D is 60 to 69. A C is a 70 to 79. A B is an 80 to an 89. And an A is a 90 to 100. There are some suggestions in the syllabus as far as withdrawal dates, attendance, academic integrity, and I do encourage you to take some time to read all of that as well. And then on the final page of your syllabus, we have the course outline and the course schedule. And I'll just walk through a little bit of that so you have a good sense of what we're doing with that. So on the first few weeks, I want to just have you get familiar with the e-learning course site. It's going to be nice and relaxed, and I will have videos there for you to watch. Week 1 this week is primarily just a course introduction, introducing you to the basic expectations of the course and introducing you a little bit to forensic psychology. Week 2 will be a deeper dive into forensic psychology. Week 3, we will start by understanding a little bit of criminal mind thinking and why people play tricks on themselves in order to get what they want, which is the basic idea of criminal thinking. And the thing to kind of be mindful here is that's something we all do. So we all have a little bit of this within us. It's just the extreme to which this plays itself out that gets people in trouble. Week 4, we'll be looking at some profiling and behavioral analysis. Week 5, we'll look at micro expressions and lie detection methods. Week 6, we'll look at what is called a psychological autopsy. This is primarily used for the aftermath of something like a suicide. Week 7 would be looking into what we call psychopathy, which is basically a lack of empathy and arrogance, and antisocial personality disorder, which is the mental health equivalent of that, but has some real life disruption impacts to it. Week 8 will be trauma and victimology. Week 9 will be looking at the nature of memory and eyewitness, because there's some interesting things that I think you'll find there. Week 10 will be forensic neuropsychology, kind of what goes on within the brain in order to cause some of these things to happen. And then we'll have a quiz. Week 11 will be violence and risk assessment, and we'll do a little bit of a case study for murder. Week 12, again, we'll do another case study on abduction. And then we'll look at things like psychological warfare. There are some things that our government does that might not be helpful for a person's psychology, but helps them to do what the government wants them to do. Week 14 will be some ethical challenges in forensics, and week 15 will be cybercrime. And then we'll close out with another quiz and your final assignment. And the final week is just if we have any housekeeping things that we need to do in week 16 in December, we'll cover those. But the primary thing that you have to do at that point would be to simply submit your course evaluation. So I hope you enjoy this course, and if you have any questions, always please free to email me. My schedule, I'm primarily around campus on Mondays and Wednesdays, but I am also teaching physically at those times, so you'll have to kind of check my office door schedule to make sure that you can find me. Probably the best way to get in touch with me would be to simply email me at nsoggie@swcollege.edu. Again, hope you enjoy this course, and I hope that this becomes something that really sparks your interest in this field of forensic psychology. So, without further ado, let's dive in and explore a little bit of forensic psychology, a field where psychology intersects with law. And I'd like to start by introducing you to a case that will frame our discussion a little bit and give us a bit of a real-world context to understand the role of forensic psychologists. So let's consider the case of Andrea Yates. Now, Andrea was a mother from Texas who, in 2001, drowned her 5 children in the family bathtub. Now, this is a really tragic case. It drew a lot of national attention, primarily because it's such a horrific crime. But it also raises some complex questions about mental illness and criminal responsibility and the legal system's ability to address these issues. Now, Andrea had a history of severe postpartum depression, as well as psychosis and multiple hospitalizations prior to this incident. She believed that by killing her children, she was saving them from eternal damnation. And her defense team argued that she was not guilty by reason of insanity. And on the other side, the prosecution contended that she knew what she was doing, and she knew that it was wrong, and should be held criminally responsible. So I want you to think about, what are your initial thoughts on this case? What are your emotional reactions to this case? And then I want you to slow down a little bit, because there are different types of thinking. There's our fast emotional reaction type of thinking and our slow logical type of thinking. And we need to learn to get past that quick emotional reaction and move to the slow logical side to really understand what's going on here. So that forces us to ask questions like, what role does mental illness play in this? How does it factor into legal responsibility? What role might forensic psychologists play in a case like this? I want to dive into this a little bit. So, we have this very complex case. And forensic psychologists, when they get involved in a case, they are applying psychological principles to legal issues. And they're working a bit in that intersection between psychology and law. And their work is really crucial in a lot of various legal contexts, from legal cases like Andrea Yates to civil disputes and family court matters. And there's some things that we need to be mindful of that forensic psychologists deal with. One of them is they assess defendants' competency to stand trial. And this involves determining whether the individual has a sufficient understanding of the charges against them and can effectively participate in their defense. Now, in Yates's case, this would involve evaluating whether she was mentally capable of understanding the proceedings and the consequences of her actions. There's also a role to play in the insanity defense assessment. So forensic psychologists will often evaluate whether a defendant meets the criteria for an insanity defense. And this requires a deep understanding of the legal standards for insanity, which can vary by jurisdiction and the psychological condition of the defendant at the time of the crime. In the case like Andrea Yates's, forensic psychologists would assess whether her mental illness prevented her from distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the offense. And then there's the evaluation for risk assessment. So a forensic psychologist will also conduct risk assessments to determine the likelihood of reoffending or of dangerous behavior, and these assessments are vital in sentencing decisions, as well as parole hearings and decisions about civil commitment. And then sometimes forensic psychologists will be called as expert witnesses to testify in court. And in these cases, they will typically explain psychological findings in a way that judges and juries can understand. So what they do is they help to clarify the mental state of a defendant or the psychological aspects of a case. And this testimony can be pivotal in cases involving claims of insanity or competency or diminished capacity. Now, beyond the courtroom, forensic psychologists can also act as consultants for law enforcement. They can conduct research on legal and psychological topics for lawyers or defendants. So there's a lot of things that can happen here, and I want you to kind of think about a case like Andrea Yates. There's so many places where a forensic psychologist can intersect with a case like this, that it's almost mind-boggling. Now, the intention here is to just kind of give you a little bit of a quick introduction to a course and what forensic psychology is all about. So we won't spend a lot of time here, but there are some fairly significant tools that are used by forensic psychologists in order to kind of conduct their evaluations. First one is what we call a clinical interview. That's kind of a foundational thing for forensic evaluations. Typically, it's either a very structured, depending upon the case, or a semi-structured discussion with the forensic psychologist and the client or the defendant about their mental health history, the current mental state, what circumstances were around the crime. And so in a case like Andrew Yates, certainly there would be some exploration of her history of postpartum depression and her psychosis. And psychosis, by the way, is a loss of touch with reality. So that's obviously going to play a significant role in this case. It also will do some psychological testing, what we call psychometrics or psychological assessments. And these are standardized tools that are used to score and kind of give a picture of cognitive abilities or personality traits or mental disorders. There's lots of different kinds. For example, one of the big ones that is often used is the MMPI-2, which is also known as the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory version 2. And it will typically assess things like personality structure and psychopathology. There's also something called the WAIS-4, which is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale version 4. It's been around forever. And this measures cognitive functioning and intelligence and helps to, particularly in places where you're questioning about determining competency. There's some vaguer ones like the Rorschach ink blot test, and some areas there's some question of the value of this, but it is purported, it's what's called a projective test, where the intention is that there's a neutral stimuli and the client has to bring what they have to the interpretation. And so it's the idea is that it brings out what is unconscious in thoughts and feelings. And so there can be some debate because there's a lot of interpretation with that one, but it does seem to have some value in many different ways. And then there's some forensically specific assessments, because those other three are kind of more generic. And that would be something like the MACCAT-CA, which is the MacArthur Competency Assessment Tool for Criminal Adjudication, a big mouthful. And this basically assesses a defendant's competency to stand trial. And then the HCR-20 is pretty straightforward, and it's known as the Historical, Clinical, and Risk Management Assessment Tool version 20. It basically has a number of questions, and it's a tool that assesses a risk of future violence, and it does that by evaluating historical factors, by looking at some clinical factors, and then assessing risk management. Now, there's also, of course, you want to get as big a picture as you can and as full a picture as you can, so that oftentimes forensic psychologists will get collateral information. They'll go to third parties and get some corroborating information, because you don't want to just trust what someone that is maybe inherently untrustworthy and just trust what they have to say. You want to go to interview friends and relatives and look at medical records and police reports and witness statements and interview and get school records or whatever you can. And in the case of Andrea Yates, this input came from her husband and from doctors and others who knew her well and would be able to provide some crucial information for forming a comprehensive view of her mental state. There's also, of course, behavioral observations. A lot of what we do in psychology is recognizing that we can't actually read someone's mind. And so we need to use what we can see, which is behavior, in order to delineate what is going on. And so they're observing the defendant's behavior during interviews and in court can provide some additional insight. And so forensic psychologists will often pay attention to nonverbal cues, consistency in stories, any signs of malingering, which is faking or exaggerating symptoms. And of course, there are the ethical considerations that forensic psychologists need to make. We need to follow issues of competency. We don't want to go outside of our lane, things that we know that we're good at. That's where we want to stay. We want to maintain objectivity. We want to ensure informed consent when possible and avoid any dual relationships that could bias our opinions and our evaluations. We also want to provide perspectives that are scientifically sound and legally defensible. So all of this ties in very closely with doing a good professional ethical job. Forensic psychologists are involved in the courtroom. And so there are many different ways that this can happen. Forensic psychologists can be called to stand as an expert witness, and I've had some colleagues that's what they do for a living. They got their degrees in psychology and then they got a degree in law. They don't practice as a lawyer, they don't practice necessarily as a psychologist. They are professional expert witnesses, and they travel around the country providing witness to and interpretations of things to different courtrooms. And their primary role is to explain their evaluations and findings to the judge and the jury in a way that is understandable and relevant to the case at hand. Now, there are a couple of things that you need to be mindful of here. First off, there's direct examination, and that is where the forensic psychologist is questioned by the attorney who called them to testify. And this is an opportunity to present findings and explain the methods used and provide opinions on the case based on their professional expertise. But then there's also cross-examination by the opposing attorney. And this is where the real challenge lies. Here, the forensic psychologist's credibility and methods and conclusions are scrutinized. The attorney may attempt to highlight any inconsistencies, challenge the validity of the psychological tests used, or suggest bias in the psychologist's assessments. There are certain things that forensic psychologists should be good at. One of them is communication. You want to be able to use plain language because very few people are actually familiar with the complex psychological concepts that we will be dealing with in this course. Very few people will have ever taken a forensic psychology course, and so they won't have an idea of what it is that you're talking about unless you're able to explain it in simple everyday language. So the idea here is that you develop the skill to break down your findings, to make it clear and relatable, and without oversimplifying or losing the nuance of the work. And all of this, of course, needs to be done in an ethical way. You want to be able to provide honest and objective testimony that is able to manage and hold up under the pressures of our adversarial legal system. The truth is that testimony of a forensic psychologist can have a profound effect on the outcome of a case. Now, In Andrea Yates's case, for instance, forensic psychologists provided testimony that was critical in determining whether she was legally insane at the time of the murders, and their evaluations influenced whether Yates was found guilty or not guilty by reason of insanity, which directly affected her sentencing and treatment. And oftentimes there can be high-profile cases like Andrea Yates's. Media gets involved, there's public scrutiny, there's public opinion, and it's important for a professional to be able to manage all of that. So, I want to kind of just conclude here that there is a broad spectrum to forensic psychology, and if you choose to go into this field, there are a lot of different areas that you can specialize in. It does fall in that weird intersection of psychology and law and society. And it raises questions about how we define mental illness and how we define responsibility and how we define justice. Now, for instance, in the case of Andrea Yates, the debate over her mental state at the time of the crime touched on some societal views of motherhood, obviously, as well as mental health, clearly, and the mental justice system's ability to handle such complexities when dealing with such a heinous crime. So, all of that, I want you to keep in mind that as we dive into forensic psychology, there will be some times when you are emotionally activated, where that quick emotional reaction will take over. And I encourage you to be aware of that, but not be controlled by it. We need to, in this course, to think slowly, to think logically, to think critically, and to apply psychological concepts to the situation so that we can do what is best in a very messy and broken situation. Hope you enjoy this course, and I will see you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.